Have you ever wondered how many stitches people need in order to learn a lesson? Today on rLounge, we hear of some dog nappers who are lucky to have all of their limbs intact. Let's go for the jugular. First, a family attempts to drive by dog napping. Entitled family tried to steal my dogs by mistake. XL, not safe for work. This happened when I was 12 years old and figured I'd share my experiences with an entitled family who tried to steal my red-bone coon hound. I grew up on the family farm in the middle of nowhere. We own approximately 350 acres and have a ridiculously long driveway. And you can't see the house from the main road. So often, people see our dogs and think they're lost and pick them up. We have collars with their contact info that are on them, always because of this fact. My parents are big on not hunting or removing wild animals unless they are a danger to us. They always had the mindset that we are living in their home. They were here first. Just respect and be aware of your surroundings. For the most part, the wildlife leaves us and our livestock alone. Other than Jacob, the black bear breaking into the grain shed and elk eating hay bales. We had a fairly large cougar who learned that our llamas made easy meals. The cougar ate all 9 of them in less than a year. The last straw was I was walking in the horse pasture and interrupted the big cat's lunch, last llama. Luckily, the family Pyrenees put himself between the cougar and I. I have no doubt if it wasn't for him, I'd not be here today. My dad decided he had to do something. He truly didn't want to use lethal methods and started researching other options. He came across a breeder who breeds coonhounds and reached out. That breeder was extremely helpful and told my dad that most cougars have had some kind of run-in with hunting dogs, so they won't be as bold. So we bought a red-bone coonhound, after doing lots of research on the breed and making sure we could handle one. Gus, timber chopper, was flown from Virginia to Canada and quickly became a valuable family member. As anyone knows with any hound, the nose goes down and the ears turn off. Gus becomes a favorite of all of our neighbors and his wandering helps with predators and livestock. Life was peaceful other than a few trips to the shelter to pick up Gus. The peace would not last though. Enter entitled family. They saw our 5 dogs chilling on our property and decided they were abandoned or lost. Not the case. My brother and I were playing in the creek and the dogs had wandered away not too far, but far enough that the family didn't see us. The entitled family then pulled off the road and got out of the vehicle and started trying to coax the dogs into their van. 3 of our dogs ran back to the creek where we were playing. Our Pyrenees, Togo, and Gus stayed. The entitled dad somehow caught Gus and started dragging him to their van. Gus started to freak out. He started to bark, alerting me that something wasn't right. So I went to see what is happening. Well, 12-year-old me saw some random guy trying to get Gus in his van, and the entitled kids and mom were gushing over how cute he was and how he will be the perfect dog for them. I wasn't too nervous as this happens often. People see the dogs, no house, and think they are lost or someone dumped them, and try to help the owners by taking them to a shelter or vet. Then often call or stop by to apologize for causing any inconvenience. I yelled out, "Hey, that dog isn't lost, he's with us." The entitled kids started to scream that they wanted the dog and they deserved the dog. Then they burst into uncontrollable sobs. The entitled mom asked me to come closer so we don't have to yell. I politely declined and said again that Gus was ours and asked the dad to please stop. Entitled dad grunted and tried to pick up Gus. Gus ended up biting the guy on his hand. He didn't break the skin, more of a warning nip. The entitled dad let go and Gus came running back to me. Entitled dad looked furious and started to walk towards me and Gus, yelling that I shouldn't own dogs because clearly we don't train or properly care for them, and how much better of a home they could offer him. I was starting to panic because this guy looked so mad, raging about how he'll teach that red bastard proper manners. I'm backing away while holding on to Gus's collar. Togo quickly stood in front of me. I was begging the entitled dad to back off and to leave. Entitled dad said something along the lines of, "I'm taking this dog to teach you a lesson. If you don't look after your pets, they will find a better home." I told him to stop as Togo is very, very protective of me and my brother, and while he has lots of training as he started showing signs of being too aggressive with people, and we didn't want him to bite someone unprovoked. Entitled dad did stop for a moment, but the entitled mom and kids were screaming that they wanted this dog. It had to be this dog. Togo gave entitled dad lots of warnings, low growls, bared teeth, lunging and snapping. Entitled dad tried to grab Gus by the collar and ended up knocking me down. Togo latched onto the entitled dad's arm and started to shake his head and yanking the guy off of his feet. One of the other dogs, she belonged to my uncle, came after I screamed and grabbed entitled dad by his pant leg, ripping them. My brother also joined because he heard me scream. I got him to take Gus and told him to run home and get my dad. Togo wouldn't listen when I tried to tell him to let go. Entitled kids and mom tried to get out to help. Thankfully, they listened when I screamed stop. Entitled Dad was yelling to call the dog off and how he would see to it that all of our dogs would be put down and that we would never be allowed to own another again. At this point, I was scared, angry, and overwhelmed. I started to cry. I thought that Togo would be put down for sure, and that if Entitled Dad took us to court, he'd somehow get Gus. Togo let her Entitled Dad's arm go, but it made clear that Entitled Dad was to stay on the ground. Anytime he tried to stand, Togo would knock him down and growl in his face. My dad came racing down the driveway ready for war. Entitled family started saying how Togo attacked unprovoked and that I misunderstood what they were doing. My dad told the family that the police and an ambulance would be arriving and that they best stay put, and if they decided to drive away, that he has pictures of the dad and vehicle, and he will press every kind of charges he legally can. My dad called some neighbors to come to help if things go sideways. The police and ambulance arrive. Entitled Dad will need stitches on his arm. They told the police that they thought the dogs weren't mine and I was lying, and the kids wanted dogs so bad, but they didn't want to pay for one. They saw ours and thought they were strays. None of our dogs looked like strays, well-fed, brushed, and spoiled. Entitled Dad then said when I told him to stop or he could get hurt, he took it as I was threatening him, and that's why he didn't listen. Him and his wife were demanding that Togo be put down immediately, and that we are animal hoarders who need to be charged and banned from owning any kind of animal. The police and paramedics told him he was very lucky. Togo is a guardian dog. They are bred for being protectors. Togo was only trying to protect me. Entitled Dad didn't care. He took us to court. Entitled Dad got 34 stitches in his arm. In the courthouse, Entitled Mom came to my parents and said she has an offer. If they accepted, they'd drop the lawsuit. They wanted us to give them Gus. Dad told her to pound sand in a less polite speech. In the end, thanks to the game cameras Dad had in various places, we had footage. The judge was less than amused, as Entitled family made it sound like I ordered my dog to attack them when they just wanted to play with the dog. Judge pointed out that a 12-year-old girl versus a 40-something grown man was not a fair fight, and that my dogs just evened the odds. We did have to isolate Togo and made sure that our dogs had microchips, and their tattoos were legible. Dad also decided that he'd fence off my brother and I's favorite places so that the dogs can't wander. I do wonder sometimes about Entitled family. And I have 2 questions that I'd love to ask. After all the expenses, wouldn't it have been cheaper to just buy or adopt a dog rather than steal one? Let's see what the community thinks. CyberMageTX says, it would have been cheaper, but entitled people don't think rationally. And dude was an idiot and entitled. Don't mess with a guard dog. Chances are you'll lose. Mess with multiple, and you don't stand a chance. He's lucky he only got stitches. DOP replies, one of the officers told him how lucky he was. Togo was a dog I wasn't fully comfortable with. I can't call my dogs off if they have to go into guard dog mode. I hate not having control in a situation like that. The guy lived because Togo decided it wasn't worth the effort. If Togo decided he was going to eat someone, there was nothing I could have done. We made a mistake when we bought him from the breeder and ignored a red flag. Whoa, I'm so sorry, OP. That's a very scary situation to be in. And you'd think that people would see a collar and sort of put 2 and 2 together. I think they must have known, but they just wanted to steal a dog. If these people thought the animals were strays, they should have called the proper authorities instead of taking it into their own hands and getting themselves injured. I think the entitled dad was wrong to speak to you that way and to intimidate you the way he did. They were trying to be heroes but ended up looking like a bunch of clueless fools. Thank goodness there was footage available to help you and your family fight the good fight. Do you have a similar story? Share it with us in the comments below. Next up, a precious pooch is coveted. Entitled woman tries to take my dog from me. Has no idea that I'm friendly with local business owners. I had someone once try to take my blue heeler, Sophie, from me when I was out of town with her. Background. At the time of the story, I was 19 and my younger brother was 6. I'd take Sophie out with me and pick him up from school. Then we'd go to the restaurant next to where my father worked as a pharmacist. When my father was done at work about an hour after we got there, we'd all carpool home together. The little brother would take his food to the little arcade machine they had in the back and blow his allowance on it. And I'd go outside to eat with Sophie while reading my tablet. It was a nice little mom and pop ice cream parlor or restaurant that had been around since the 1930s, and it's across the street from a rather well-known local tourist attraction. We knew the owners, and they liked her, often spoiling her with food that was either turned away or just stuff they couldn't sell that day. The owner's wife would often spoil Sophie with free ice cream or a piece of saltwater taffy. The story. The little brother had had a half day on the day this happened, so we'd gotten there right as the lunch crowd was leaving. I leashed Sophie to an outdoor table at the restaurant while my little brother and I went inside to order, as per our usual routine. The owners had no problem with it, as we were on good terms at the time and still are. Sophie wasn't aggressive, and I was on the first name basis with most of the staff, who adored her. Most of them were either still in high school or just graduated and picking up their first-time job. I go to place our order, including something for Sophie to eat, and halfway through the order, the server points behind me and says in a panicked voice, "Someone's trying to grab Sophie." I dropped what I was doing, turned around, and saw this heaviest-set lady trying to corral Sophie around the table, with one hand on her leash and the other hand trying to grab her collar. I'd had people ask me if she was for sale before. She was and is a very beautiful dog, even at 16 years old now, but nobody had tried to just take her before this. I rushed toward the door and threw it open so hard it nearly cracked the glass pane. Meanwhile, the cashier was calling the owner out of the back of the kitchen. After I got out the door, I demanded, "The hell are you messing with my dog for?" The lady responded with a sweet voice, "I was going to take her home." Like she wasn't just trying to steal someone's beloved pet. I lost my crap and screamed at her, "You get your hands away from my dog, or there's going to be police involved, and it won't be for you." I was, and still am, a big guy, 6'1", and about 280 pounds. She jerked her hand away like she'd been stung, but decided to try to start ranting at me about how, "You obviously don't care for the poor thing. If you're leaving it tied out here in the sun, you don't deserve this sweet little thing." The nerve of this lady. She'd been caught red-handed, and she was still trying to get my dog. At this point, I'd had it. "Lady," I started in a growl, trying and failing to keep calm. I've had an anger management issue since I was small, so this wasn't easy. She's in a shady area, and I set a bowl of water down for her, which she hasn't even touched yet. I'd been in the restaurant for about a minute before you decided to try to abduct her, and we eat outside of this establishment all the time. At this point, I was about ready to explode, but kept calm as I could as I grabbed Sophie's leash and unclipped it from its table. She immediately hid behind me, and I tried to back off, but this entitled lady wasn't done yet. "You don't deserve such a beautiful dog. I want her for my kids to play with," she demanded. At this, I sensed an opening to de-escalate the situation. "That's a terrible idea," I started, having an idea on how to get out of the situation. This breed is notorious for being bad with kids. This is true with the breed, but not with Sophie. She's always loved kids, and she's mixed with Australian Shepherd, which are generally great with kids in my experience. But this lady didn't need to know that. "What are you talking about? She's been so friendly every time you're down here." This raised every alarm bell and red flag in my head at the same time. She's been watching me and Sophie for at least a week or two to know how often I was down here, and know our routine. She might even have planned this out in advance. This is a cattle dog. They're bred to work with half-wild cattle and are known as healers for how they bite at heels of people and animals. They're not like Lassie. I started ranting. To be honest, I never knew if she understood that reference. And it doesn't matter anyway. This is my dog and you're not getting her. Now leave us alone before the police get here. The staff have already called them. This was a bluff. I had no idea what the staff was doing. But it made her stop for a minute. And that was long enough for me to get back to the door and open it before asking the owner, who had come out of the back, "Hey owner," not using his real name without permission, "mind if I wait in here with Sophie for a bit? Someone just tried to take her while she was out front." The owner took one look at me and at Sophie trying to hide from the lady and replied, "Head into the back. I'll let you know when it's safe." I took Sophie and headed into the back area next to the arcade machine, where she cuddled up to my little brother, who she's always been attached to. Meanwhile, I heard the owner start telling the lady off. She even tried to claim I stole her dog. The conversation went like this. "He just took my dog." "Nice try, but he's a regular customer and he's had that dog for 2 years now. I've known her since she was a puppy." "I'm not leaving until I get that dog." Owner, in the most quiet, soft, and collected voice I'd ever heard him use. It honestly made him more intimidating. I'd never seen him get angry before, and it was terrifying. "No, you're leaving right now. We have you on cameras trying to take his dog." "This isn't over. I want to speak with the owner." "Yes, it is. I'm the owner, and you're banned, both from my store," for some reason he never called it a restaurant, "and all the other stores in town." "You can't do that. You have no authority." "Yes, I can. I'm head of the local council, and I'm making sure they all see what you did. If you leave now, you should get away before his father gets here. I've already called him, and he's not a nice man when his family's threatened." This was true. Dad was a true Papa Bear when it came to us kids, even threatening the local deputy once when he came into our house when he wasn't home. This was what finally broke her, but she wasn't going to leave before getting in one last blustering half-threat. "Fine, I'll leave, but this isn't the end of this." After which she stormed out. It turned out that was the end of it. The lady got kicked out of all the local-owned stores and had to do all her shopping at a chain store in the next town. She later moved out of the area when people found out what type of person she was and stopped being nice to her. Nowadays, the ice cream shop has been sold to new owners. The old owners retired a few years later and are living a comfortable life in the Washington Peninsula. I still talk with them online every now and then. I gave the wife my reading tablet so she could enjoy her books more often as a retirement present. My father also retired and spends most of his time around town, hanging out and playing with his friends in a blues band. And my brother and I work at a local grocer. Sophie still likes kids and the sweet things in life, but we've had to cut back on how much she gets. She's getting old and having trouble getting around now. If people show interest, I'll try to find one of the photos from when we'd stay out in front of the store eating together. Edit. This story blew up more than I ever could have expected. I appreciate the support in the comments and now know how close I came to losing my dog, along with some nightmare fuel of what could have happened to her. Some more details. This happened in a small community about an hour and a half east of Seattle, Washington. The locals were, and still are, a rather tight-knit community, and everyone out here knows each other. Most of the longer-lived stories around here used to be passed from parent to child. My family was no different, but Mom decided to pursue her own career when she was younger and sold her part of the family business to her siblings. Dad grew up in a similar community in Idaho, so he's also big on small town values, helping neighbors when they need it, taking care of others, etc. I was a third-generation local brat, and most of the area knew my family, since my uncles still ran one of the larger stores. Sadly, people from the larger urban areas are starting to migrate out this way, so a lot of the smaller businesses are being driven under by large chain stores. For all pet owners out there, I'll say this: get your animal licensed and chipped if possible. If you can't get them licensed, keep a photo and vet records of them for when you have to prove it's your animal. And never make my mistake and leave your pet unattended in a public place. Yikes. The fact that she was watching you and basically knew when you'd be going to the shop and when she'd make her move is terrifying. How do people think they can just take other people's property? Especially a dog. It's a good thing you have such a great relationship with the people in your town. It's nice to know that there are folks out there who have your back. I think you're right to advise to get pets licensed and chipped. We can never be too careful nowadays. A pet is a part of the family to a large amount of people out there. It's hard to imagine the thought of losing a pet to someone who feels entitled to take them as their own. What would you have done? Thank you for joining us today on rLounge. Before you go, be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. If you have something you want to say regarding today's content, share that with us in the comments below.